Hello everybody, and welcome back once again to Mason Zero ASMR. It's been a while. Haven't had a lot of time to make videos, but one of the videos that I have wanted to make is an update to my Meren of Clan Nel Toth commander deck. Quite a few people watched my original video, but it's a bit out of date now, and I thought it was finally time to do it again. So, let's just get into it. I hope you guys enjoy this video and find it relaxing, entertaining, and maybe you've discovered a new card or two. So it's in its own deck box now. So let's go ahead and get it open. So, let's see, right about there. The first thing you might notice is the fact that Meren here is looking pretty cool. This is one of the reprints from Commander Legends, the, I guess, portrait profile style. And it features Meren on a pinkish purple background, and she's in side profile, got pretty cool green hair. I thought it was cool and made it stand out from the original art, which was quite dark. It was cool, but it was very dark, especially in the foil version, which I had. So this is a pretty cool addition. And if you don't know what Meren does, she was once a very popular commander, maybe still is. But she is a 3/4 for 2, a black, and a green. Legendary creature, Human Shaman. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. At the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's mana value is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return it to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Very strong ability in a sacrifice deck. Essentially, when Meren is out, every turn you get a creature card back from your graveyard to your hand, or, if you play your cards right, so to speak, straight to the battlefield. So this deck is going to be all about sacrifice and mill and things like that. So we'll start with the creatures. We have here Underrealm Lich. It costs a 3, a black, and a green for a 4/3 creature. If you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, and you can pay 4 life, and Underrealm Lich gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. I mean, it's a solid creature that can protect itself, but above all, that card draw replacement effect is pretty crazy. You can fill your graveyard very quickly. Damogoth Titan is 4 hybrid black-green mana for an 11/10. Whenever it attacks or blocks, sacrifice a creature. Now this is both a sacrifice outlet and a potential win condition. It doesn't have any evasion, but it is big. And there are a couple other cards in the deck that care about power, so that's fine. But yeah, just a fine card. Zulwort Cutthroat. 1 into black for a 1/1. Whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is just a staple in any sacrifice deck. Scavenging Ooze, another green staple and commander. 1 and a green for a 2/2, pay a green and exile a card from a graveyard. If it was a creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze and gain 1 life. Here we have a Wood Elves, the Magic 30 celebration version. Not sure what the real full name is, but 3 mana for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a forest and put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. It's 3 mana for a 1/1 with this effect, which is not as good as other similar cards, but it Gets any forest, including a non-basic, and it's a 1/1, so it combos with Skull Clamp. Similarly, we have Farhaven Elf, also 3 mana for a 1/1. When it enters, you can search for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So you can get a swamp or a forest into play tapped, and also sack it to Skull Clamp. Razaketh the Foul-Blooded is 5 black, black, black for an 8/8 demon with flying and trample. You can pay 2 life and sacrifice another creature to search your library for a card and put that card into your hand. So obviously a sacrifice outlet, but also a way to get whatever game-winning cards we need. Sakura Tribe Elder, classic green creature for ramp, also great in a sacrifice deck, because it's 2 mana for a 1/1. You can sacrifice it to search for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Need I say more? Smothering Abomination. It's 2 and 2 black for a 4/3 with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. Again, another outlet for sacrifice. We want those. Yavimaya Elder is 1 and 2 green for a 2/1. When it dies, you may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. And you can pay 2 mana and sacrifice the Elder to draw a card. So it's fine if you put a Skull Clamp on it or sacrifice it for another reason, but also you can sacrifice it to itself, which is pretty great. And it ramps. Daemogoth Woe Eater is 1, a black, a hybrid black-green, and a green for a 7/6. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. When you sacrifice Daemogoth Woe Eater, each opponent discards a card, you draw a card, and you gain 2 life. So obviously, has that downside of sacrificing a creature, but we want that. It can sack itself. It has an effect if you'd like to stop sacking creatures. And it's 4 mana for a 7/6, which is pretty big. Elvish Mystic, 1 green mana for a 1/1, tap to add green. Pretty straightforward. Always nice to have in a green deck. Reassembling Skeleton, 1 and a black for a 1/1. You can pay 1 and a black and return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Once again, great target for something like Skull Clamp or any other repeatable sacrifice outlet, since as long as you have mana, you can keep bringing it back and sacking it. Very useful little guy. Splinter Fright is 2 and a green. It has trample, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill 2. This is a great way to just keep putting cards in the graveyard, and since it can be big and it has trample, it becomes a threat in its own right. Ruthless Technomancer is 4 mana for a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to that creature's power, and you can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice X artifacts to return target creature card with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is one of those cards that combos well with the big 11/10 for 4 mana. And make a whole bunch of treasure tokens. Kind of weird ramp, but you can do it. Puppeteer Click is 5 mana for a 3/2 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. At the beginning of your next end step, exile it. And it has Persist, which is when this creature dies. If it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. This is just a cool card to get an opponent's dead creature, and it comes back if you sacrifice it. Shieldred Whispering One, definitely one of the best cards in the deck if you can get to the 7 mana that you need to cast it. It's a 6/6 with Swamp Walk, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. This card does everything we want. It's a major threat. Thragtusk is 4 and a green for a 5/3. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. When Thragtusk leaves the battlefield, you make a 3/3 beast token. This is a quintessential blink, sacrifice, recursion card. It does something when it enters, and it does something when it leaves. And we have this cool secret lair foil art that I like quite a lot. Plague Crafter. We have the anime art version from Jumpstart, which I just kind of find funny. It's 2 and a black for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. So it makes everyone sack something or discard something, but it never does nothing. Ravenous Chupacabra, 2 and 2 black for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls. It's murder on a stick. Yeah. You can bring it back with Meren. It's good. Solemn Simulacrum has been a standby of Commander that is finally starting to get outclassed, but in a sacrifice deck where you can bring it back, I think it still serves its role very well. 4 mana for an artifact creature. It's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you can search for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and when it dies, you draw a card. Classic. Grim Haruspex is a 2 and a black 3/2 with morph for 1 black. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. Drawing cards is good. We have a lot of creatures that die. Pretty simple. Reclamation Sage, 2 and a green for a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Again, a pretty quintessential green commander card. There's plenty of versions of this, some of which do other things, but the fact that this has 1 toughness, again, means it combos with Skull Clamp, which is high priority. Acidic Slime is another staple of Commander in green. 5 mana for a 2/2 with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. It's very versatile. It's a creature that we can get back with Meren, and it has Death Touch, so it can trade up with anything that gets put in front of it. Pawn of Ulamog is 1 and 2 black for a 2/2. When it or another non-token creature you control dies, you may create a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn token with sacrifice this creature, add colorless to your mana pool. So it's going to make kind of one-use mana sources that are also creatures, so we can get some sacrifice triggers off of them. Sorrowf Realm Eater is a pretty interesting card, but pretty good. It's 1 a black and a green for a 3/3, and whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on Sorrowf. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Sorrowf has 1 or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with mana value less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. So it's a very weird board wipe that your opponent knows about and can play around, but every time you kill one of their creatures, it gets bigger. So pretty weird card, but it's kind of fun in this deck. Butcher of Malakir, 7 mana for a 5/4 with flying. Whenever Butcher of Malakir or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. That's the kind of effect we want. When one of our creatures dies, one of theirs has to die too. Gisa, Glorious Resurrector, is 4 mana for a 4/4. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. At the beginning of your upkeep, put all creature cards exiled with Gisa onto the battlefield under your control. They gain Decayed, which means that when they can't block and when they attack, sacrifice it at end of combat. So that's pretty cool. Whenever your opponent's creatures die, you can get them back for a turn, essentially. Satyr Wayfinder, 1 and a green for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You can put a land card from among them into your hand and put the rest into your graveyard. Just a cheap little card that you can play early and mill some cards into your graveyard to get started. Vile Entomber. We have the foil or old border version from Modern Horizons, I believe. It's 4 mana for a 2/2 with Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. So Death Touch, always nice, but this is also a way for us to get a card that we really want into our graveyard and then get back with Meren. It's almost as good as just putting it in our hand, sometimes better, depending on how big of a creature we can bring back. Skull Prophet costs a black and a green for a 3/1, tap to add black or green, or tap to mill 2. A little bit of fixing and ramp that we can play early, and if we don't need it, then we can simply mill cards into our graveyard to get creatures. Fleshbag Marauder, 2 and a black for a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. Simple, symmetrical, beautiful. Deathbloom Ritualist is a relatively new card, probably in the last year or so. It's 5 mana for a 3/5. Tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Now at 5 mana, that effect maybe seems a little too slow, but trust me, when games are going long and you're sacrificing creatures and milling, you can add a lot of mana. I think last time I played this deck, I tapped it to add 18 mana. That video is actually on YouTube, and if I remember, I will link to it at the end of this video, where I played it against one of my friends, and we recorded it. So that was pretty cool. Definitely a fun card in this deck. Fauna Shaman, 1 and a green for a 2/2. Pay a green, tap, and discard a creature card to search your library for a creature card and put it into your hand. Pretty basic. Caustic Caterpillar, 1 green for a 1/1. Pay 2 and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Repeatable sacrifice and destruction. Catacomb Sifter, 1 a black and a green for a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion token with sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless to your mana pool, and whenever another creature you control dies, scry 1. Which, of course, whenever a creature dies, scry 1 is the main reason this is in. Here we have Spore Frog in the League of Legends Arcane Secret Lair frame. So it is Gromp. And Gromp, or Spore Frog, is 1 green mana for a 1/1. You can sacrifice it to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, and this is a staple in most Meren of Clan Nel Toth decks, because you can get this every turn with her ability and essentially prevent combat damage during a specific turn where you're being attacked. So you can just kind of hold it up as a get out of jail free card for 1 attack every single turn cycle. So that's all the creatures, which is a good chunk of the deck. Now we have instants, starting with Entomb. Entomb is 1 black mana, search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. This is what that creature Vile Entomber is based on. This can get any card, but realistically we're getting a creature. I guess if you're really desperate, you could thin your deck by putting a land in there, but most of the time we're getting a creature that we want to resurrect. Black Sun's Twilight. X and black. Up to 1 target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. If X is 5 or more, return a creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This card is great because it does multiple things. It's a removal spell, and it's also a recursion spell if we pay enough mana later in the game, so love the versatility there. Putrefy is 1 a black and a green. Destroy a target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. Removal, always good, obviously. Deadly Dispute is 1 and a black. As an additional cost, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards, and create a treasure token. So just a simple card draw spell. It gives us the chance to sack something. Love that. Windgrace's Judgment is 5 mana. For any number of opponents, destroy target non-land permanent that player controls. It's a cool removal spell that's in our colors. We can take out 3 non-land permanents for 5 mana. Pretty good. Grizzly Salvage is a black and a green. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or land from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. So once again, just filling our graveyard with stuff. Into the sorceries now. We have Dig Up, which is 1 green. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Or if we pay the cleave cost of 1, 2 black, and a green, we search our library for a card, put it into our hand, then shuffle. Gaze of Granite. X, black, black, green. Destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less. Kind of a goofy board wipe, but I like this card, and I figured this was a good place to play it. Barter in Blood. 2 and 2 black. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. What more could you ask for? Ritual of the Machine. Now this is a bit of a deep cut from Alliances, I think. And it just happened to be in my collection of like bulk cards I got at some point. But it's perfect for this deck. It's 4 mana, sacrifice a creature to gain control of target non-black, non-artifact creature. So this is like a blue effect to gain control of a creature indefinitely. Not till end of turn, just forever. Or until we lose it, of course. But having to sack a creature to cast it is obviously something we want to do. So pretty cool find. Red Return, 4 mana, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Also has flashback by sacrificing 3 creatures. Necrotic Hex is 7 mana. Each player sacrifices 6 creatures. You create 6 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So this is also kind of a weird board wipe variant. Obviously doesn't kill everything in most cases, but either way we end up with 12 power and toughness on the board. Innocent Blood, just 1 mana, each player sacrifices a creature. Good thing to play early in the game. Rishkar's Expertise, 4 and 2 green, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Another one of those kind of effects. And you may cast a card with mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. I love the Expertise cycle. This one is probably the best one. Victimize, 2 and a black. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. I love that this makes you sack 1 creature in order to get 2 back. That's an awesome rate. Big fan of this card. I think more people should play it. Migration Path is 4 mana. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped. It also has cycling for 2. There are of course many variants of these 4 mana ramp spells, but I think because we're in green and we have a lot of ramp, having this one with cycling is ideal, so we can get rid of it if we really don't need it. Casualties of War is 2, 2 black, and 2 green. Choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact, target creature, target enchantment, target land, or target planeswalker. So if we have a target for each of these, we can destroy 5 things. If not, we can destroy less, but that versatility is of course very appreciated. Dictate of Erebos, 5 mana, for an enchantment with flash. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Such a good effect in this deck. Just what we want to be playing to thin the herd on our opponent's side. Moldervine Reclamation. It's a 5 mana enchantment. Oh yeah, we're in enchantments now, by the way. Whenever a creature you control dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Pretty good. Life gain, card draw. It's great. Just like Greater Good, which is 2 and 2 green. Sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. Discarding cards is not a big deal for us. We're fine putting things in the graveyard, but having some of those creatures with abnormally high power and sacking it to this is pretty great. It's like drawing 11 cards and discarding 3 is obviously awesome. So this is a good card to have as a free sacrifice outlet just in case, but also can turn into a lot of card advantage. Now here is an interesting card you may not have heard of, Hecatomb, or Hecatome. I found this enchantment while searching for cards that are in the old frame and that were under $1, just to see what goofy things existed. And as soon as I saw this card, I knew it was perfect for Meren. I had never seen this card before. It's a 3-mana enchantment. When it comes into play, sacrifice 4 creatures or bury Hecatomb, which basically just means we have to sack 4 creatures or sacrifice this. And you can tap a swamp you control to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. And both of those lines are great in this deck. Obviously, we have plenty of swamps, so this just becomes a win condition. And then sacrificing 4 of our creatures is pretty great. That's 4 triggers for Meren's experience counters, or for any number of other things that care about when things die. So, highly recommend Hecatomb if you have a sacrifice deck. Now onto artifacts. We have Soul Ring, of course, 1 mana, tap to add 2 mana. A classic commander card, as we all know. Talisman of Resilience is 2 mana, tap to add colorless, or tap to add green or black. Talisman of Resilience deals 1 damage to you. A little bit of fixing. Skull Clamp, I've mentioned many times in this video. 1 mana equipment with equip 1. Equipped creature gets +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. If you're not familiar with Skull Clamp, the idea is to put this on a creature with 1 toughness and have it immediately die and draw 2 cards. Swiftfoot Boots is for our commander mostly. 2 mana equipment with equip 1. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Culling Dias is 2 mana, tap to sacrifice a creature and put a charge counter on it, or pay 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card for each charge counter. So it's a way to freely sacrifice 1 creature per turn cycle, basically, and then later we can sacrifice this to draw a bunch of cards. Just a single Planeswalker. I don't love this card. It's on the chopping block, but it's fine. Vraska Golgari Queen, 2 and a black and a green for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker, +2. You may sacrifice another permanent. If you do, you gain 1 life and draw a card. -3, destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. And -9, you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. Obviously a great ultimate ability there. The other 2 abilities are fine. It's fine. Command Tower. We're on a lands now. Command Tower taps to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Always need to have that. Hissing Quagmire enters tapped and can tap for either of our colors. And for 3 mana, it becomes a 2/2 creature with Death Touch. Overgrown Tomb. It has the swamp and forest subtypes. And when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Necroblossom Snarl taps to add black or green, and it enters the battlefield tapped unless you reveal a swamp or forest from your hand. Tainted Wood. I love the Tainted cycle because I think they're pretty good. You can tap to add colorless, or you can tap to add black or green, but activate this ability only if you control a swamp. And I think that it is likely we'll control a swamp in most cases, so this card is basically just like a really good dual land. Llanowar Wastes, tap to add colorless, or tap to add green or black, and it deals 1 damage to you. Dark Boar Pathway, it's black on the front and green on the back, so we can play it as either side. Golgari Rot Farm is a bounce land. It enters tapped, and you have to return a land you control to its owner's hand when it enters the battlefield, but it taps for green-black together, so 2 mana. Deathcap Glade enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. Tap to add black or green. And then Temple of Malady enters tapped, and when it enters, you scry 1. Tap to add black or green. And those are all of our dual lands. Now we have some utility lands. Ghost Quarter taps to add 1, or tap and sacrifice it to destroy target land. Its controller searches their library for a basic and puts it onto the battlefield. This makes us go down a land, but this is still a good land to have around. It can get rid of something problematic. Hostile is a funny name, but also an interesting card. You can tap to add colorless, or you can tap, pay 1, and sacrifice a creature to put a soul counter on hostile. Then if there are 3 or more soul counters on it, you remove those counters, transform it, and untap it. And it turns into Creeping In, which is also a bit of a pun. And it is a 3/7 creature. Whenever Creeping In attacks, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creature cards exiled with Creeping In. And for 4 mana, Creeping In phases out. So kind of an interesting card, but it lets us sack a creature every turn, or at mana. Then we have Terramorphic Expanse. Search your library. Tap and sacrifice Terramorphic Expanse. Search for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. Evolving Wilds is the exact same thing. Grim Backwoods taps to add 1 mana, or for 2 a black and a green, tap and sacrifice a creature, draw a card. This is obviously very slow and very expensive, so it doesn't happen often, but in a pinch, it's nice to have that backup on a land. High Market, tap to add colorless, or tap and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. This is again another way to sack a creature every turn for pretty much no cost, kind of 1 mana in this case. Now we have some single-colored lands. Crypt of Academe. It enters the battlefield tapped. It taps to add black, or pay 2 mana and tap it to add 1 black to your mana pool for each black creature card in your graveyard. That could potentially be quite a bit, so this is a pretty good card to add lots of mana late game. Baron Moor enters tapped, taps to add black, or it has cycling for 1 black, which allows us to discard this card and draw a card. Dakmor Salvage enters the battlefield tapped, taps to add black, and it has Dredge 2, which has a lot of reminder text, which I will read now. If you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly 2 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise draw a card. So we can essentially replace a card draw with milling 2 and putting this card into our hand from the graveyard, which is cool. If we mill it, we can get it back to our hand and mill 2 cards to fill up our graveyard, and then potentially do it again if we discard it to something. Dryad Arbor is the perfect land for this deck. It is a 1/1 land creature. It is also a forest, so it does tap for green, but it's affected by summoning sickness like a creature. But we can sacrifice it because it's a creature, or put Skullclamp on it. Tranquil Thicket is another cycling land, but green this time. And then we have our basics. And I actually customized my basics for this deck a little bit. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forests, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 swamps. And these swamps and forests are from the Alara block because I wanted my basic lands to match where Meren of Clan Nel Toth is from. And it turns out she is from the realm of Jund on the plane of Alara. So I got specifically the arts for the forests and swamps from the Alara block that represent Jund. And I like doing this for my commander decks because it makes them feel more cohesive and themed, and basics are cheap generally. So I thought that was a fun way to tie this deck together and to end it. Obviously, you don't have to do that, but if you want your deck to be themed that way as well, highly recommend these 2 lands, which is swamp number 241 and forest number 246 from Alara Block. Anyways, that is my Meren of Clan Nel Toth deck 2023 update. It's been several years since my last video, so probably a fair few changes, but the core of the deck and the core idea of the deck has remained the same. I hope very much that you liked this video and found it relaxing, entertaining, and maybe informative. Maybe you learned about some new cards. Would love to know if you knew about Hecatomb or Hecatomb already, since that is quite a deep cut, it seems like. But yeah, leave a comment if you enjoyed or if you have any suggestions or got any ideas. And I will see you in the next video, whenever that is. I don't make too many of these anymore, but hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.